Hey everyone. So my name is Miles Mundy. I am a fifth year graduate student here at Brown in the Pathobiology department. And it's my pleasure to introduce our two moderators. So we have two moderators today, Samara Cummings and Kimberly Meza. So I'll start by introducing Samara. So Samara got her BS from Brown University and studied biochemistry with a minor in Hispanic studies. She's planning to do a postbac in the Fozzie lab, studying structure and dynamics of intrinsically disassociated proteins, and she hopes to apply to physician scientist programs in the future. Our second moderator is Kimberly Meza. She is a rising fifth year PhD student, also in the pathobiology program. Shout out. And she has a Bachelor of Arts from Barnard College of Columbia University in biological sciences with a minor in psychology. She did a postbac at the University of Florida, and then also did another postbac at NCI doing cancer research. She is, like I said, a rising fifth year in the Holder Lab in the pathobiology program, and she's investigating oncogenic and resistance mechanisms in kidney cancer. And Kim, which is incredibly important, not only has engaging in a summer teaching course and has done a lot of mentorship opportunities and commitments at Brown, she hopes to be an academic faculty in PI in the future. So I'd like to introduce both of them and get on with the panel.
Thank you for the very kind introduction. And thank you to all of our panelists for agreeing to sit on this panel and discuss some strategies and opportunities for the attendees in the room who are looking to start on the path, navigate the path that they're currently on, or looking towards the future for some of the similar goals that we all share here. So just to give an overview of what the panel is going to look like, so Samara and I will be going back and forth, asking some questions, but we do want to leave a lot of time for Q&A. So start thinking about those, and then we'll give time towards the end for people to interact, which we hope you will.
Yeah, so we would first like to start off by having our panelists introduce themselves, maybe say your name, hometown, stage of research or institution, and any long-term career or personal goals that you have.
Save my chest. All right. Y'all can hear, right? Okay. So my name is Colwyn Headley. I've had the nickname of Coco since undergrad, so you can call me Colwyn or Coco. It doesn't matter. I'm originally from Guyana. It's in South America. I spent my childhood between Guyana, Brazil, and Ohio. It's crazy. So I guess my hometown is to some extent is Worcester, Ohio as well. I did my undergrad at Ohio State. I did my PhD was also conferred from the Ohio State immunology. Before grad school, I did a lot of stuff in antioxidant pharmacology and oxidative stress. I did research in stem cell biology and bone regeneration. I did plant pathology, and I also worked in industry. I also sold shoes for a little bit because it was broke. So, so grad school, immunology, I looked at, impact of aging on immune host pathogen interactions, so infectious diseases, heavily trained on that. Worked on COVID as well. Ended up at Stanford. I got recruited out there to a cardiovascular lab where now I'm looking at the role of mitochondrial dysfunction in the immune cardiovascular axis and whether I can just deliver mitochondria to every cell and make people healthier. So I guess the future goal is to open a lab and world domination and retire. I guess it's, yeah.
I gotta follow that? That's why I don't. My name is JP, he, him pronouns. I'm from Los Angeles, California. I went to Occidental College, so it's a small liberal arts school. I actually worked on the venom of fish hunting cone snails, so got to go to Hawaii and find these snails and learn how to scuba dive and all of that. I moved to UNC I went to UNC because I started that podcast when I was a senior in college. And someone was literally like, you should consider grad school. I had no idea what a PhD was until I want to say a month before the deadline. So I talked to all my professors and they walked me through the entire thing. Didn't know you get paid, all of that. Now I do. Moved to North Carolina dealt with the culture shock of not having really good food, although Paola was telling me the food is actually better than I think. Now I'm a rising fourth year, and I'm currently an intern at the NIH Office of Science Policy, which I think is like a very cool way to think about science. So like, for example, I'm on the origin of the pandemic case, which has been super inflammatory for a lot of people. But it's really interesting seeing how Congress asks people like Tony Fauci what he thinks, how he thinks the pandemic started. And I think that's a lens of science that we don't really think about, right? What else? At UNC, I didn't want just training in science. I also partake in a lot of DEI initiatives, and I was trying to figure out how can I innovate in DEI. So I'm also doing a certificate for innovation for the public good, where we take like design thinking, systems thinking, a lot of the things that Sherilyn was talking about earlier. What else did you say? Long-term goals?
Yeah.
Long-term goal is I want to dominate the world with him and really combine everything. So I don't think scientists should just be siloed to one thing. I do think we really need to embrace all of our identities and realize that we are a complete person. So that's why I'm really interested in science communication. I try to take graphic design and stuff like that, as you can see. Science policy, and yeah.
Great. So I'm Marco Carpenter. I am originally from Colorado. I'm actually a dual citizen, so my mom's from the Netherlands and my father's from Colorado. I went to Clark University, which is not that far from here, so it's a small liberal arts school of about 1,000 people, which really didn't have many research experiences. And so I did one small REU at CU Boulder, and that really got the itch for me for science. And I did a postbac at Penn, and then ended up being a grad student at Penn. And then I have gone across the street to CHOP, or the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, where I'm now a postdoc for the last 3 years. And I'm interested in developing lipid nanoparticles for the brain. And my long-term goal is to run my own research lab.
Hello everyone, my name is Nakea Pennant. I am from Stone Mountain, Georgia. I am currently a 6-year Ph.D. candidate at Clark Atlanta University. I started out at South Carolina State University, which is also a HBCU. I majored in biology, minored in political science and chemistry. From there, I started off as a freshman doing lab work. Started off looking at nanoparticles in a local river. And then I just followed the cancer track on through. Did a couple of internships at the Medical University of South Carolina, and that really drove me to my path to pursue a PhD. Originally, I was typical pre-med, but I really enjoyed cancer research as a whole. So long-term goals is to essentially just really bridge the gap for undergraduate students, especially from underrepresented communities, and just really help them develop their careers in the future.
Thank you so much for introducing yourselves. I think part of the reason why we picked you guys as panelists was that we're really interested in the unique experiences that you bring at the graduate and or postdoc level. And we were wondering what your approach is to, or what you think is a good approach to joining a lab at the undergraduate, graduate student, and postdoc level. And what in your mind are factors that should go into making a decision like that?
Rock, paper, scissors, or just gonna...
Whoever wants to take it.
Well, I think most people say the mentor is the most important, and I was somebody who actually didn't take that advice and chose the science, and I can tell you, you should take that advice. I think that's what I can say, is that your mentor is extremely important, and even if it's not the science that makes you the most interested in, how happy you are on a day-to-day basis is extremely important.
I think I second that. I kind of alluded yesterday that I treat the relationships in science the same way I would treat friendships or romantic relationships. Communication. When I joined, I had a really intense mentor in undergrad, and I'm super thankful because he really taught me how to troubleshoot. Like, it was rough, but I'm glad I had the experience. And so when I got to grad school, or when I was looking for doing rotations and stuff, I kind of knew all the questions that I wanted to ask. do you need me to be around a 9 to 5? Like, what's like your working style? Do you have to meet every week, et cetera, et cetera? To some extent, I was a bit more independent when I started grad school. The thing that I sort of I make most of my decisions off of curiosity. Unfortunately, I don't know if that's a good or bad advice, but I look for the curiosity factor first, and then based off of the interactions with the PI, but also the people in the lab, I guess the gossip, figure out like if there's any red flags. But it's hard. It's hard as a undergrad, and as a grad student, I think it's harder. I mean, I kind of parallel that to personal relationships, because at least at some point in your life, you probably had like one toxic ex, right? So you try to be as what's the word? As vigilant, or as like
Discerning?
as discerning as possible. But sometimes it's hard to see them.
Yeah, I really thought it would bite me in the ass by now, but I really do follow the environment. Like, for example, I played baseball at Occidental and had great offers at other institutions that were like more prestigious. But Occidental was just one of those places where like people, they literally were known as like the school that opens doors for you, not like opens doors career-wise, but literally like I'm gonna open the door as you walk into the cafeteria, right? And I don't know why that made such a big difference, but it really did. And my time at Occidental just exposed me to, prioritizing my happiness and making sure I was surrounded by people I genuinely did care about, right? So for me, it's all about environment. Like I do care about science, obviously. I love science with my whole heart. But when I joined my lab at UNC, I'd be the first to tell you, it's not like I liked genomics all that much. It was just I really liked the mentor and everyone else in that lab. They also all like Taylor Swift, which is really helpful. I'm a Swift. I don't like Taylor Swift, actually. Do you like Taylor Swift? Sorry. I just really follow the environment, right? So like UNC was a great place, and being in it now, my immediate community is awesome, right? I work at that brewery again. Started working there because I'm broke, but also the community, and there's something really empowering about that. And the reason why I'm here at Brown is because I came to this conference last year and felt the same exact thing I felt at Occidental and at UNC, and I was like, I need to come back to this conference, right? So
Can I come back next?
Right for that. You just gotta keep So for me it's all about environment.
So I definitely want to piggyback off of everyone. I do agree it's definitely about the science as well as the environment. So going in as both an undergrad and a graduate student, you should look at both, come up with a list of potential PIs that, one, follow the science, and then after you follow the science, kind of do some digging, informational interviews if you can of other people that have previously been in that lab, that's currently in the lab, and I believe some people discussed this same exact topic yesterday, but follow that, and it can kind of assist you with kind of gauging how the environment is, how the science is going to be, because mentorship is very important. You want a mentor that's going to help uplift you, guide you in your science, as well as both professionally and personally as well.
I'll say, so one question that I tell mentees or people that just ask me for advice is, ask the person that you're planning to, work with for the next 5 years, what is their conflict resolution style, or how have they dealt with hard conversations? That could be a telling way, because they're not expecting that. They're like, oh, dang, okay.
One more thing I'd add to that is like, I used to ask mentors, how do you define a successful mentee? And sometimes they're like, oh, by papers. And it's like, that's fine. That's part of academia, right? But sometimes I'll get answers like, I just truly just want the best for my mentee and want to make sure they're in a very comfortable working space and all of that. And when I get answers like that, I'm kind of like, ooh, like let me go over there. So.
This is an excellent segue to our next question, which is kind of probing a little bit further about the mentors. And so we're curious, now that you're kind of looking back at your younger self and the way that you have come to where you are now, when were the times that you leaned on your mentors? Was it research, career-based, personal? And if you could talk a little bit about that and maybe having multiple mentors for some of those situations.
All the above. So again, because it's a relationship, you're gonna be in grad school. It's at least 5 years now, right? 5 to 6. So it's a long-term relationship, and then you get divorced if you leave on bad terms, but if not, they become kind of like your science parents to some extent. You know, that's their to some extent their child, right? Like science child. So in undergrad, like I said, my mentor was really tough on me. Ultimately, it was a good thing because it really taught me how to be independent and troubleshoot. And he's like my grandpa because he was like the one I had in undergrad. And so every time I go back to Columbus or I'm passing through Ohio, like we'll stop, just get dinner and just like catch up and stuff. And he still write my letters, so it's good. But that's not, I don't keep him around just for letters, but I generally appreciate him taking the opportunity, when a lot of people wouldn't. Because I had no experience in oxidative stress or knew much about biochemistry, and here I was doing these complicated ass experiments, and stuff was working. So I was like, okay, well, so that's one thing. In grad school, so I recommend conflict resolution because you're gonna have arguments or quote unquote disagreements, or strong disagreements at some point within your graduate training. And for me, I think when I was younger, I was probably more reactive, kind of like reactive oxygen species. I used to be like, I used to be as corny, but I used to be much more quick to react to things. But as I got older, and after going to therapy too, actually, I realized that the first reaction should not be to escalate a problem, but instead really look sort of like introspection. Am I the problem? That's the first question I ask myself. Okay, and then sort of like, when you do a PhD, and at least for me, like I started doing this critical analysis of my life, which is, I don't know if anyone did that, but for me, like I started analyzing when I was under the cell culture. I was like, oh, dang, okay, so, and it really just helped me be a better person. And so my mentors were supportive, one, because we had a trust, like there was, a bidirectional trust, because, so I remember in grad school, towards the end of grad school, my mentor's dad passed away, and she's from England, and I went to her. I was like, Joanne, I used to call her Dr. Turner because I just didn't like. Anyway, I was Dr. Turner. Like we don't have to do dissertation defense right now. We can just I'm fine waiting another 6 months. It's okay. And she was like fighting back tears, and she was like, no. You said you wanted to graduate at this point. Like, let's get you to the finish line. And to me, that was like that was such a real moment because. Once she was doing something real, and I think that her coping mechanism was also to help me, through the door. So I treat all of my mentors like family. That's been my principle.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different types of mentors, and I purposely try to find mentors that like help me in different aspects of my life, right? So like I kind of think about it as like a hike, right? Like my research mentor, is the person where he's putting down signs if I'm on a hike, being like, all right, this is the direction that you're going in, and I won't hold your hand and walk you through it, but this is the direction that I'll lead you. I have mentors that are like my affinity mentors, first generation students, first generation Filipino professors that will be like, I am first generation, I'm Filipino, I know what it has been like to be on this journey, and I'm going to mentor you that way. Right, I've had cheerleaders, people that don't necessarily give me technical knowledge or expertise, but people that are like, oh my gosh, like for example, Nanda today was your comment, that was cheerleader mentor, right? Just someone who's so ready to uplift you whenever. There's also sponsors, right? People that are very willing to like give you a new backpack while you're on a hike and give you water while you're going on this hike, There's other types of mentors too. Yeah, and the technical mentors, like hopefully you can go to my PI is trying to send me to a different institution to learn a new technique, and those are the people that are just teaching me new skills, right? So I think that's important to highlight is you're going to have different mentors throughout your life, and it's important to try and find them all.
Yeah, and I will just echo that I think it's naive to expect to get everything from one person, and so you really need to branch out and try to find those other mentors. And that's something as a mentor now I'm trying to do, right? If I'm not the best person to help you, I can definitely help you to find somebody else. And so I think that's always a
great
resource
approach. Mentor, that's what it was. That was
a resource.
A resource.
So I definitely do agree. You need a mentor for every aspect of your life. Definitely if you're early on in your career, you're not exactly sure where you want to go, get a mentor for the different options of career paths that you would like to go in. And then your network is your net worth. So the more mentors that you have, they can assist you, connect you with other people, and you just have this slew of mentors, both professionally as well as personally as well. For me personally, being first generation graduate student as well as college student as well, I leaned more so on my undergraduate professors and mentors as I went into graduate school, because they kind of could help me navigate through that path, especially early on, not knowing what to expect. Of course, I have my PIs, other collaborators that I look towards as mentors as well, to kind of help me navigate the technical aspects of my research. And then I have both an industry mentor as well as academic mentors as well. That way I can kind of do more of those informational interviews and figure out where I want to go or pivot, and I can further expand my network, as well as, like you said, when you have people that you're mentoring, you can extend that network too as well.
I guess I'll add one more thing to that, because one question, I'm extroverted, if you can't tell. And some of my friends, that are postdocs, minorities, they're not as extroverted and mostly introverted. And they ask me, Coco, because network is your net worth. And the advice that I'm going to tell them is look, I get it. Sometimes, you don't want to talk to folks. And so you don't have to become extroverted, but maybe practice, being strategically extroverted. So give yourself maybe 2 or 3 hours at a conference. Make a goal of talking to at least, 3 or 4 people that, that are outside of your expertise area, something like that, or just ask a professor to get coffee. It's because the worst they can say is no, and most of the times they don't say no. They want to talk about, there's ego in science, and so everybody always wants to talk about their science and how great they are, and Joanne said this thing to me. She said, she be dropping these Yoda sort of references, or Yoda things, and she said, Coco, sometimes the best mentors you're not going to find the best mentors are going to find you. And I was just like, dang, that's deep. And so looking back at my experience through grad school, so I was at Ohio State, midway through, moved to San Antonio. I started crashing UT Health San Antonio's because I was at Texas Biomed, which is a research institute. They ain't got no grad students there. It was I was the only Black person there, Black scientist, or it was one or two other. But I would crash campus. And I ran into one of the professors, and she was, so I had to write a grant. I was writing an F-32, and then the grant, the professor was like, you should meet this person. And then I met this person, and she was Jamaican, and it was the best experience, because we had this connection of being from the Caribbean. And then she invited me over for Thanksgiving every time I was in San Antonio. So I don't want to say it's serendipitous, but you also have to be open to, the opportunities, because I think sometimes we close ourselves off from opportunities without even realizing. So,
Absolutely. So we're also wondering if you could speak to a time in your career where you had to advocate for yourself. So whether that is maybe in one of these strong disagreements, or a time where you're networking, and more importantly, how did you stay true to your personal values and identities while doing so?
Okay, I'll give an example, man.
Extrovert.
So actually, the project I presented today, man, that was a whole advocation lesson. So, and I mean, this is more of a technical lesson as opposed to one dealing with microaggressions. But when I had started the PhD program, the original project was, just kind of compare some young versus old T cells and see what happens. So I don't know if there's any immunologists in the crowd, but immunologists are really concerned about cytokine production and surface microexpression. And so here was I coming, I've read all these papers about, aging and immune function and stuff, and there's this common theme of mitochondria popping up. And I was like, And I kept thinking about what I wanted to do in grad school. People say that you should do safe science, get a PhD, and then when you get tenure, then you can do the risky stuff. I was like, man, that's at least 15 years. So I was like, so I went to her office, I went to Joanne's office, and I was like, look, I think the project right now is boring as hell. I don't know. And so we got into a bit of back and forth about why I wanted to, why I was instigating to change the direction of the project. And I was just like, look, people have done this in different models with different infections, and we're probably not going to see that much difference as far as surface marker expression or like the cytokines produced. And I feel like, you know, we should infuse it, remix the science with some stuff I've done before. And had all this experience in oxidative stress, and I wanted to keep, you know, to some extent, keep following the electrons. And so I was like, I want to try looking at mitochondria. And so the conversation became like, okay, you should do rapamycin. Why don't you do rapamycin or mess with the mTOR pathway, or try antioxidants? I was like, well, I mean, everybody's doing, you know, messing with mTOR, and antioxidants don't work. I did that for 5 years. Like, once you go to higher systems, it doesn't pan out. And so we were going back and forth, and she was getting like, I think she was getting a little bit like heated, and she was like, all right, well, I guess you just have to put new mitochondria in the cells then. I was like, you know what, that right there sounds awesome. And I ran with it. And so she said to me, all right, so I'm gonna give you one chance to, you know, to make it work. And when it doesn't, you can do the project. So end of the story. So I mean, I stood my ground because I thought I had a better idea. But also, for me, I was lucky to have a mentor that was receptive to, you know, discourse. I know some people don't have that opportunity.
Yeah, I think advocating for yourself is really hard. But what I've learned, and you know, that this is why Sherilyn's talk really resonated with me, is like you're always dealing with a person who has their own perspectives and things, right? So whenever I'm advocating for myself, I always try to think about, like if it's my PI, for example, I try to think to myself, what does he need from me, and from his perspective, why is he being so hesitant to do something, right? Because I think it's really important to try to understand the fact that like this person that you're talking to, they also have stuff going on, and they don't necessarily know what you're going through. So when you're trying to advocate for yourself, it's just remembering that it's a two-way street, and it's okay to ask questions like, I want to do this, what's preventing you from letting me do this? Or like, I know that, or like I'll even tell my mentor, hey, I really want to apply to go to this conference, but I know you have concerns about your funding. Like, these are the different avenues I can go to get this funding. What do you think? Right? Like, it's just a matter of trying to understand the other person you're talking to. And it reminds me of a relationship, to Coco's point, is like, it's just communication, right? But it's a lot harder than it's easier said than done, I think. But try to practice that, is like, try to put yourself in the other person's shoes and try to have that bidirectional conversation.
Take a personality assessment test. I'm dead serious. Like it does help. Like, and I've taken like 5 of them, and they all fall within the same range. And I mean, it sure tells me I'm extroverted, but also like, you know, how I deal with conflict, and what's my style of life, right? And I, like, back to relationships, that dictates, you know, whether it becomes like a divorce versus like, you know. I mean, it really does. Like, that's how I see it. So, well, this is, you know, my perspective.
ENFJ? Are you an ENFJ?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, me too.
I remember the DIC one. I think they said, I was like, I don't need like blueprint. I just do stuff. I was like, oh, okay, this sounds cool. But anyway.
So I think I will just echo again what they have said. I think one time, I've always advocated for myself in terms of pay, and so I think I'm an extremely hard worker, and I think I've always put it, you know, and again, I think knowing your opponent and knowing what they want, and say, like, I want to work in the lab, you know, for X amount of hours, but, you know, financially it's not feasible, and if I need to, you know, work another job, you know, I won't be able to do this, right? So knowing what your PI wants and what they are trying to get out of you is really important, and you can leverage that to kind of get what you need.
It works on parents too.
Your parents? My parents like this.
Sometimes.
So it actually took me a little bit longer to learn to advocate for yourself. For me, I was more of the person who went in and was just like, hey, hard work pays off, and it's going to continue to work that way. But I learned early on in my Ph.D. career that not all the time you're going to work hard, and the science is not always going to go in the direction that you expect it to. So at that point, you know, kept on working hard. My PhD was like, why is it not working? Why is it not working? And we're trying to narrow down, like, why, is it your technique? Is it this? I'm like, no, it's not my technique. It's not this. The experiments are just not working, and I had to learn at that point that I can't just keep on being this workhorse, expecting it to work and going with the flow, and you actually have to stand up for yourself, because no one's going to advocate for you but you. So that's the important thing to do. So I just learned that, hey, this is not working. We need to pivot and go into a different direction. And I came up with a list of ideas and was just like, hey, let's try this, this, and this. And it essentially ended up working, but I ended up changing projects anyways because the funding was in a different direction. But essentially, you just have to learn to stand up for yourself because no one else is going to do it for you.
Thank you so much. And actually, going based off Marco and Nakea's response just now, it seems like a thread in that might be about being an underrepresented scientist. And so, what advice would you give to this audience about asserting your value and your contributions in these professional environments?
Can you repeat that? I think we.
Sorry. So a little bit about, like asserting your worth, negotiating, advocating for yourself.
Stand on business.
And
That's what it is.
acknowledging that some of us, maybe don't have that cultural, what's the word? To leverage that in these spaces where maybe you are the only one.
So I can say that to some extent, splitting my childhood in 3 different places definitely has some, I think, built in some resilience because you have to assimilate and going from talking English to Portuguese and then Ohio, dealing with the Amish is crazy, bro. Definitely culture shock, but also racism in small town Ohio as well. And so I think I don't want to, I hate saying that I had tough skin, but to some extent I dealt with enough. I put experiences in context to things that I've dealt with. Been broke in 3 countries, like, why am I scared of a PI? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, we dealt with worse things. The worst they can, do is argue with you. Like, what are you going to do after that? Like, you're going to figure out a solution. So that was my driving perspective. I guess, start from the bottom. Like, what's after the bottom, right? So, again, this was because, I had my own, like, my family had our own struggles moving from Guyana to Brazil to here. So that sort of perspective to some. It's okay. So when I went to therapy, I remember talking to my therapist about this stuff, and she was like, "Yeah, you're in survival mode. That's what happened. Like you're just running through life, and you don't realize all the accomplishments you've done because you still think that you're starving." And I was like, "Damn, that was deep. It was real though. It was real." So realizing, those things really helped me put in perspective my worth. And so when I was interviewing at Stanford, I felt like I was in the place to be like, look, I want to be here. I don't need to be here, and that changes the dynamic of a relationship because unfortunately, a lot of international students, because they're dependent on visas, sometimes they're more subservient or afraid to have like hard conversations with mentors because they're scared of like, they're gonna cut my visa, I have to like go back home, and there's like, there's typically you've got literally the world on your back as far as like family and other things to deal with. So it's realizing, go to therapy. That's what I'm gonna say.
Go first.
Honestly, I think one of the things that I had to learn was also just advocating for yourself, that first advocate for yourself and then you can advocate for others as well. Because I learned through graduate school that you're not in it alone. Most of the feelings that you're going through or some of the trials and tribulations, we all face those same exact things. So if you're able to advocate for yourself, you're able to advocate for others as well.
And so that's a good point. Like, it takes a village, and having support in grad school was super, because in undergrad, you're going from, some of you guys went to big or small schools, but like, there's stuff to do on the weekends, on a Friday, et cetera. And grad school is like isolating because you got to go to lab, and you're there from, 8 a.m. to sometimes 10 p.m. by yourself. And having a support system, people to talk that understand, the journey, makes it a lot easier. And in grad school, that was helpful. As a postdoc, I co-chair like the Black Postdoc Association, and we try to just get away from campus and, just, I don't want to say talk about our microaggressions, but just sort of de-stress. So we'll do a Sunday brunch every so often where we just like kick it and talk about stuff, or we just chill, or we've got a happy hour here and there. But establishing sort of a safe space where you can really just, exist, I think is important. And sometimes it's hard to do that on campus, and that's fine. Go find, for us, we were like, all right, well, we don't have to do it on campus. We can go somewhere else where we can kick it and we don't have to worry about, other people. So.
Yeah, I think that's really important, like finding community in the place that you're at, right? I mean, like I already said, I really try to follow my different environments. So like at UNC, I joined the Kapamilya, which is like a Filipino affinity group on campus, because they understand the Filipino experience in higher education, right? I have a lot of friends that are first generation that are currently in grad school, and we talk about the same things as well. And I think it's really important to, one, get those concerns out, feelings out, but also to capitalize on that, right? Like I said, I try to find an affinity mentor, and usually it's like a faculty member that also has the same experience. I would go to them and just be like, hey, how did you navigate this? And this is my situation right now. How can I talk to this PI or DGS or this person in a way that, you know, in a way that will be productive? Another thing is, I sometimes feel really weird about academia. I love academia. I want to start my own lab, right? But I do think there's a component of, I do want to go out into the communities that I'm in. That's why I love bartending so much, because I get to talk to people that aren't in science and get their perspective and see how they are approaching issues as well. So when it comes to advocating for yourself as a historically underrepresented individual, it's nice hearing from like someone who works at the restaurant next door and being like, why didn't you just do this? And I'm like, oh my God, yeah, you're so right. You know, like it's really important to find those experiences outside of lab as well. I think that helps a lot.
I'll pass. Sounds good. So looping back to something that Nakea was talking about earlier, I'm wondering if there was ever a time where you felt like your research wasn't going very well and experiencing a lot of difficulty, and when did you know that it was time to pivot, and how did you do that?
I'm gonna skip this one because I stood on business.
Well, for me, it was a difficult point with me and my PI, just going through the motion of, hey, you have to also think in the notion of, this is their baby, and a lot of times your PI doesn't want to see their baby fail. And when you tell them like, hey, your baby is not working, we need to move on to something else, they kind of, I don't want to say it, at times, depending on the PI, it might hurt their ego. So you kind of have to not always come delicately with it, but just straight up like, hey, this is not working. We need to change, do something, because at the end of the day, it's your time that you're spending in the lab, and you don't want to waste it, as well as, you know, you want to go ahead and jumpstart your career as well. Because if your project isn't working, then that will essentially end up halting that. So you have to think about yourself in that aspect as well.
So I think it's completely normal to have experiments that don't work and not work for 6 months and never work, right? So I think that it's total. That's just to be a reality that you guys accept, and I think that that's just extremely important. And then with that is really just a little bit of grit, and even when you are at those hard places, just being able to say, you know, how can I think about this differently? How can I approach it with a different method? The same question, you know, that's really how you can address the same, you know, get around some of those roadblocks.
Yeah, a couple months ago, nothing was working for me. And it's actually quite common. Like on the podcast, I always ask that question, and people have always said like, my entire third year was just failed experiments, right? And it's pretty wild. What I did a couple months ago is I did go to my committee, because I stacked it with people that are, you know, experts in the same field that I am in, and they all offered different experiments and solutions. And I thought about how that could apply to the project that I'm currently working on. I went to my PI with all that information, and he was like, oh, like this totally makes sense. Like, let's pursue this direction, because I do see that you are struggling right now, right? Yeah, I think that was my main thing.
I guess, yeah, in that sense too, I kind of forced my mentor to pivot, because we went in a different direction as opposed to just looking at surface markers on T cells in young and old mice. I thought that was, but that speaks to sort of like there's a sentimental. I've been told don't get attached to your projects the higher you go, because you know that's just the way it is sometimes. If you can't get funding for it, you have to put it on the back burner until you can come back to it later. And so Joanne really exemplified that, because she was like, all right, well, let's see what you got. And that's something I try to do now as I move forward with ideas. But one principle I got from Villamena, who was my sort of my undergrad mentor, I approach, and I used to fail a lot as a sophomore and junior in undergrad. Like experiments would work. I would just miss like key details, and I think because of that, my sort of strategy became 90% reading and 10% like execution. And so it took me a lot longer to actually do experiments. And Joanne was, to some extent, she was like, "Yo, why are you not doing any science?" And I was like, "I'm still reading about stuff," but inadvertently, that also, I guess like as a result, that improved my ability to really, not have to do too many troubleshooting like endeavors. But yeah, I think grad school is about learning how to troubleshoot and learning how to pivot and not having. We say we have to make a hypothesis and either prove or disprove the hypothesis, and sometimes I agree with that, and sometimes I'm like, okay, well, what else is out there, right? So.
And I think that something that we were thinking about in relationship to kind of figuring out what is a priority and when to make those sort of decisions is also, as underrepresented scientists, we kind of face this. I think sometimes it can become a burden of carrying out extra responsibilities. I mean, all of you have mentioned being part of a lot of organization boards, having your own initiatives, and I think that this is something I still struggle with. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how do you balance those responsibilities while advancing your own career and deciding what to prioritize as you go through this journey.
So I'll start, because I think it's really important that you actually find that stuff, you get joy from that stuff, so don't do things that you don't get joy from, right? So I mentor, 2 or maybe sometimes 3 students, underrepresented students a summer, and it's a lot of work, but it's something that I really, really enjoy, right? So I think you have to, don't do things that you don't enjoy, because I get things from that, personally.
Absolutely agree. You don't want to take on anything else that feels like work. You want to feel, like you said, a sense of joy whenever you're doing extra initiatives, because then it becomes laborsome and then you exhaust yourself. So just do the things that bring you joy and the things, I guess, as far as the lab, what you have to do.
Yeah, like I love my science and I do consider it my job, right? But when I say job, I literally mean like, oh, it's my 9 to 5 and I love it. Like I try to do so many things outside of science to help refill my cup, and that can mean like calling my family or calling my friends back in California. I'm in a band, so I really enjoy playing. So I really enjoy playing music, right? But that's the stuff that really does recharge me and gets me ready for the next day, right? It's all of that stuff outside of science that gets me ready to do the initiatives and stuff like that. So yeah, I really want to emphasize the work-life balance. It truly does matter, especially in graduate school when you're trying to train, really doing your best to get this data to your PI. But don't forget that you are a person and you need to also take care of yourself. I shouldn't be saying that, but because I suck at it. But you should try to take care of yourself.
Yeah, no, burnout is real. Again, I echo what everyone's already said, that do the things that you love, and to me, giving back. It takes a village. I didn't get to where I am by myself. I had mentors and sponsors, and so the saying that I say is, I'm driven. Not everybody can fit in my car, but I'm gonna help you get your license, and you can help the next person. So that's just been my approach to helping folks. But at the same time, how I see it is, I don't want to overexert myself. But I still know that I want to be a better mentor. I want to be a better writer. I want to be better wine taster. How about wine club? Okay. And so I try to strategically do activities that are also improving my own perspective on things. So the second saying that I use is help me help you. So I'll help you, and then I'm sure I'll get some benefit from that as well. So.
And can I just probe a little bit? It sounds like when you're saying strategic, you're saying no to some things. How does that conversation go?
I just don't reply to their email.
Ghost? Okay.
Oh, so first of all, whoever invented emails, man, I wish we had a conversation. Generally, when I start, for example, when I started at Stanford as, I guess, first year postdoc, it was manageable. It was manageable to answer everyone's replies in time. But as a third year, bruh, like it's hard to keep up with everything. And so at first I felt so bad, not being able to reply to things. And then I went and I messaged all my own mentors. I was like, I get it. I understand why y'all took like a month to get back to me.
Coco,
So-
it's like a relationship, though. You can't
It-
ghost people.
Well, it's not ghosting. It's not ghosting if they understand, right? Like they get it. So that's one thing. But again, because you can't be Superman for everybody. You do have to set limits, and so a popular thing that I figured out once I got to California is people use the word bandwidth. Like they say, yeah, that's not my bandwidth. So I've been using that as well. But honestly, I don't say no to a lot of things, if I'm being completely honest. So.
And we'll get ready to open the floor. So if we want to start passing mics, but if anyone else wants to also add to the saying no.
Yeah, I think you should definitely say no, and I think ranking what's your priorities is important, right? So you just have to create that list for yourself. And if 1 week you have to spend an hour less in lab because you want to mentor or go to a talk about diversity or whatever, then that's really you have to be okay with that because your priority is X. So
Definitely set those boundaries early with people.
So questions?
Yeah. Questions from the audience?
So something I feel like is kind of like a universal experience for like a lot of people, whether you're undergrad, graduate, postdoc, new job, anywhere, new place. And something I feel like everyone experiences but doesn't talk about until you bring it up is like imposter syndrome. And I've talked to like so many people here today, and I feel like I've had the same experience with everyone, where everyone feels like, wow, everyone around me is so much smarter. How do I feel like I belong? And I feel like no matter where you are, everyone experiences it. And like I said, not many people talk about it. And I feel like a confident scientist is always a better scientist because you feel more confident what you do. You're able to, go more risky routes because you feel like you can. So like, how did you guys, or like, what are some strategies that you guys used in your, whether undergrad, graduate, anything to overcome that, feel like you belong and deserve where you are,
So I can kind of take that on. So early on, especially being a graduate student, I was so accustomed to being the golden child or the golden student throughout my whole entire life. And then to see experiments fail, I actually was like, at some point I was like, oh my gosh, am I a failure? And I start questioning myself. But then you also have to remember why you're there, why you're motivated to be there, as well as definitely talk to people that know you personally that can uplift you. As well as your peers in your cohort, because like I said before, we go through similar trials and tribulations, and you really won't know it until you discuss it with other people. And sometimes getting those extra perspectives from both people that are in the field as well as outside of the field kind of give you a sense of reminding you what your purpose is and why you're there. So as long as you remember what your purpose is and why you're there, it can help motivate you. Sometimes it does seem kind of bleak or dark at times, but if you can kind of like just get it out of the mud, it does help sometimes. So definitely lean on that support system.
You good? Yeah.
I always feel I have imposter syndrome right now, as I said on this panel. I had imposter syndrome giving that talk. I had imposter syndrome seeing them two present at their poster and their undergrads. They were amazing. So, I mean, in my opinion, it doesn't really go away. It's just a matter of realizing and understanding, everybody in this room can contribute something to an issue or to a problem, right? I'm not saying we're all going to have the same idea. Chances are we're all going to have different ideas to tackle the same problem. And that's what I try to remind myself, right? Is like, I'm one of many people in this room, but I do have a unique perspective to do this, right? Whether it be graduate school, right? Everyone has something unique to them, and I think it's hard to remind yourself of that, but it's really important that you do.
I'll echo. I mean, there's this, I forgot the saying. It was the comparison is the thief of joy or something like that.
Comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah,
That's on my
so-
fridge as a magnet.
But imposter syndrome never goes away. But for me, or I'll say, although what I did, how I frame my sort of science and just life perspective is like life fulfillment. So I'm doing this for me. I'm not really doing it if society benefits, that's good. But at the end of the day, it's my journey, it's my story. So I find some comfort in knowing that the decisions I make, I don't want to look back at my life when I'm 77 and be like, oh man, I should have did this or that. And so I just go full force at everything I try to do. I don't know if that's healthy necessarily, but I'm hyperactive, so this is where like my
But you
life
know
is.
why you do it, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think your values are always driving you, and your values
Exactly.
are so different from everyone else's.
Yeah.
That's what separates you from everyone else.
Yeah, because no one can force you to make decisions, right? Like, so okay, another example of Joanne dropping some knowledge on me. When we were moving from Ohio to Texas, I was in her office and I was, just contemplating, because at this point I was in Columbus. I wasn't in the streets, but I knew like the city pretty well for like 6-7 years. So it felt to some extent like home. And I was in her office and she was like, look, Coco, sometimes you have to move away from family to become the person you want to become versus who they expect you to become. And I was just like, dang, all right, I gotta go. But that really is it. Like, the chapters that you're sort of having for your life are your chapters. You're the one who's writing it. So imposter syndrome never goes away. Sometimes I feel like science makes you bipolar. Like, you have like highs, right? That data is like hitting, and then when you're like, oh man, I gotta.
Yeah,
So you
all
have
the
those
time.
lows, but having community, having like the happy hours that we go to ever so often, we talk about field experiments. We give each other advice on how to, it's knowing how to take advice, right? So just having community has been super important. And I ask the same question to people that are, that I sort of like look up to, admire, and they say the same thing. Yeah, it never goes away. Just look at your CV ever so often. Yeah. So one person said, yeah, keep a copy of your CV from like when you're in grad school to now, and you'll see the changes. And I was like, okay. So sometimes when I am feeling like an imposter, I do look at the lines. I'm like, all right, I'm doing okay.
So I was just gonna feed off of that, and I think giving yourself a pat on the back is really important. So even today for my talk, there was again the lead up, and I didn't feel like it was the best, but I think you just have to say like that was really great, right? And even just giving yourself a pat on the back is really important.
Why am I raising my hand? Yeah. Another thing is I don't know why I'm raising my hand. Like, shoot me. Another thing, yeah, you brought this up, the failure thing. Something that has been popping up a lot is this thing called a shadow CV. Has anyone heard of a shadow CV before?
Mm-hmm. No.
Yes.
Yeah, so like keeping track of all the things you've been rejected from, or like the things that you consider failures.
Oh, the L's. Okay.
Yeah, the L, and like it
Yeah.
sucks looking at the L's, but it's also like, oh my gosh, if I see this person having all these rejections, it's like, oh, it's not just, he's not a perfect person, or they're not a perfect person, right? Like everyone is mortal. And I have two stories to tell real quick. So like, I was interviewing the NHGRI director, Eric Green. And in all the interviews he's ever had, he always talks about Francis Collins, the former director of the NIH. And I love and admire Francis Collins so, so much. But I asked him, like, do you ever feel imposter syndrome, like, being the successor of Francis Collins? And he was like, no, because he is mortal, right? Like I said earlier, he has his own specific subset of skills that does separate him from Francis Collins. So one, you shouldn't be comparing yourself to another person, because that breeds imposter syndrome. And another thing is, I interviewed the president of the National Academy of Sciences. And Marcia, she led the response to the BP spillover in the Gulf of Mexico. And she was like, why the hell am I, a singular person, being sent to Texas to go to the BP headquarters to do this, right? And back to your tribe thing, it was amazing because she said she got to Houston and she was immediately surrounded by people she met at different conferences from all around the world, because they all got sent to this one location. She was like, oh my gosh, like I suddenly don't feel like an imposter anymore because now I have this team of people to help me solve this problem, right? So it's like, try to not, like, you're never alone when it comes to these things. When you're trying to solve like scientific problem, for example, you have your lab, right? Like, I don't know, try to surround yourself with that community to try and uplift you when you feel that imposter syndrome.
Yeah, we all go through it.
Yeah, I don't know if that made sense, man. I
No, it
Is there a
did.
question there?
No, I'm just hijacking the panel. So I recently changed labs, and my new lab is all postdocs, and I'm a grad student, and that was very shocking, and I really felt the imposter syndrome. But there was a switch in perspective, and it was a new field too. But there was a switch in perspective. I realized that when I compared myself to other people, if I thought someone was better than me, it meant someone was better than me, or someone knows more than me. So it was this relationship, and then I realized that I had to switch it to this way. And so when he gives his talk, it was amazing, and he's talking about, I want to put, all this metabolism in T cells. And then the person next to him talked about, look at all these chromatin dynamics. And so it's not that he's in T cells and this is chromatin dynamics, is that the way that we learn and the way that our intelligence is being deepened, we're all in the same plane. It's just, we're going different directions. So they don't know what I know and I don't know what they know, but we're always in the same plane. And if you meet someone that is now in your same field and you're both talking about the same thing, that's where diversity comes in, because your life will naturally make you approach the same topic differently. And so at the end of the day, you don't know what I know and I don't know what you know. And that helped me so much.
Lisa, pull up a chair.
Yeah,
But that was like my recent dealing with that.
in grad school, again, Joanne would drop in knowledge. So she says, look, there's a sign that you're ready to graduate when your mentor doesn't know S about your project, and that's when you plateau. And to some extent, that also helped with just dealing with imposter syndrome, because you realize that knowledge is ever expanding. And so what my mentors focused on when she was in, as a postdoc or as a faculty, is completely different than the direction I'm taking. And so you're not expected to have the same, there's overlap, but the things that you discover in your PhD and beyond are your own. And the chances of someone doing the exact same thing as you with the exact same perspective are I don't know, I'm not good with math, but it's not high. So.
Did we answer your question?
I want to say one more thing, that it's better to have imposter syndrome and be humble than overconfident and assuming that's the worst quality of a student. It can lead to a lot of problems in terms of falsifying science, not knowing what your project is. So I think much rather manage this with mentors and peers than overconfidence.
Pride comes before the fall. I got a lot of sayings. I
feel like there should be a circle, not
for real.
There's a question over here.
So I actually just wanted to add one thing. So one thing my PI in grad school told me that really helped me with imposter syndrome was that you're pretty much by definition doing something no one else has done before, and so the rate of failure is really high. And so the fact that you failed doesn't mean that you're a failure. It just means you're doing something really hard.
Any other questions?
Hurry up, or I'm going to ask one. Okay. So microaggressions have been mentioned a couple of times, and I wanted to ask you, what's the most helpful response that you have ever seen or experienced or given to a microaggression, either towards yourself or towards someone else?
Let's go first. No. I mean, I've had a couple examples. I'm trying to choose the best one, or the worst one. No, the worst one. So when I used to work at Ohio State, because I guess imposter syndrome, I was staying lab late and stuff like that. And there's this tunnel system that runs through the buildings, and I often got mistaken for the janitor, a lot of times. And I mean, I didn't really make a big fuss out of it. And so I was mentoring postdoc students, telling the story about how it happened. And I was instead of really being inflammatory, I use it as a teacher. I was like, no, ma'am, like I'm a scientist here. I think you need to talk to somebody else. But then there's another student, another grad student at the time, Patrick. He was explaining, and it's really his story, but he was explaining like how he went to interview with this person for a position, and Patrick was like, yeah. So I knocked on his office, and he gave me the trash can, and I was just like, man. So it validated like the stuff we were dealing, like the trash we were dealing with, and I don't necessarily know if there's a right way to deal with microaggressions. Because so I honestly hate the terminology of microaggressions because how many microaggressions do you need before it's a macro or like a nano? You know what I'm saying? Like, so everyone has a different threshold of responses, and I don't know what yours is, but again, because of the things that I've seen in my past, I'm much more less reactive. So yeah, I don't know if I have advice. I'd say be yeah. I don't know. I don't know if that helped. Sorry.
I would love to open the floor on this one.
I'll just add to it a little bit. I think that you should try to at least handle it with grace, depending on who the person is. And definitely like hold your head up high and know that you are not that microaggression. And my biggest thing is, I'm gonna prove you wrong. I don't care what you say, what you think about me. I'm gonna prove you wrong, and I'm gonna show you who I am. I'm not that microaggression or whatever that person has said to you. So I think just hold your head up high and go above it.
This one time I was at Rockefeller too. I was at Rockefeller University for a talk, and I gave this presentation, and then a professor, some researcher came up to me. He was like, "So who did your work for you?" I was like, like, and so my first reaction is to laugh and stuff. I was like, "What you mean?" Like, my whole PhD was on tuberculosis, and then after lunch, like another one of my colleagues came up and she was like, "Yo, did you hear that?" I was like, "Yeah." Like, what? Like, so it's just teachable moments. I think some people don't. No, so there's implicit bias, and sometimes I try to give people the benefit of the doubt that maybe they don't even understand the word choices. Maybe I'm like, maybe there's a better word choice, but he could also been like, complete. That person could have been a complete douchebag. So, yeah, having grace is hard, but I mean, the older you get, the microaggressions the aggressions don't disappear. Like, especially as minorities, you're gonna deal with, the higher you go, the less, unfortunately right now, the less of us you see, right? So, yeah, there's a reason why.
If I can actually chime in. Yeah, because I once got an advice that I think it changed the way that I interact with microaggressions, because I think that I always was like very shocked, and there's like the shame that comes, like when you are actually offended like that. But actually, one of my best friends, she's not a scientist. She told me that once, that it's a moral imperative to at least show to the other person, because I think that most of the time I like to believe that it's just the environment that the person grew, right? And that environment cannot be conducive to like being exposed to diversity, right? So she told me once that it's a moral imperative to make the situation so absurd for the other person, that it's funny, and then the person will actually like understand that the comment or the attitude was not like okay. So for a while, like, I'm a Latina, first generation. Well, so much many identities at the same time, and I arrived at Yale, right? Ooh. And yeah, and I remember that the first time that I gave like a seminar for the department, someone was genuinely like a very well established PI, right? No names. He was actually, and I was showing, like what I did in my PhD, right, in Brazil and a little bit in England as well. And I understand where this person was coming from, because I think he was impressed. And so it was actually a compliment, but the way that the compliment went through was, yeah, like, oh my God, I had no idea that you could even do this type of science in Brazil. And I understood. I think it was actually interesting because I was in a good day, so I understood where it was coming from. But at the same time, I really wanted to actually demystify, right, this view that we have about places of excellence or not. So I just told him, and oh my God, I'm saying him. Uh, I just told this person X, you know why, right? It's because in Brazil we actually train the monkeys from the Amazon forest to work on the bench with us. And he actually he didn't have an aggressive reaction. He said like, are you are you serious? And like, are you actually capable to do this? And I said, yeah, like because they have like opposing like polygars, you can actually train them to pipette, so you can do much more. And I kept going until he realizes. And I think that that's actually a very good strategy that was taught to me like by this friend, because I don't think it come, at least in this interaction, it didn't come from a place of being dismissive or anything. He was actually trying to compliment me, but I think it was an instrumental moment to show, hey, you can do great science in any place of the world, and we have to kind of wash out this idea of like centers of excellence. So I think that that's a trick that I learned. So when someone says something absurd to you, just up a notch, right? Try to kind of make the person actually realize what's going on. So yeah, I think that that was a great tip because now I tend to use it.
I'll say one more thing because as a black man in science, there's the trope of angry black man if you have a too much of a quote unquote real reaction to some of the BS that we deal with, and I realized that from an early perspective because there was an incident when someone got accused about some stuff and his reaction was justified in my eyes to be angry, but they were like, oh, he's being aggressive, he's a threat. And I was just like, dang. So, yeah, you kind of have to dial to some extent. And to me, you know, what does it mean to actually be inclusive? Like, if you've never been around a black person or you can't understand mannerisms, I feel like these are things that need to be addressed with programs like this that are, that are popping up because cultural sensitivity, like just colloquial. So I try my hardest to stop code switching. Y'all know what code switching is, right? Like summer presentation, I try to keep it as relaxed and that's how I talk to everybody. Like that's just how I do it. And so that's me trying to some extent, resist the assimilation or like quote unquote professionalism that you're supposed to display all the time because we have our own like influences. So yeah, that's it.
Something very quick to add. Similar experience being a black woman in STEM. I was in lab and in my lab group, and we were talking about like different strategies to help further what we're doing in lab. And I and another black researcher were talking to the person that had been there the longest, and she had said in that situation that she felt attacked. And so I just had to tell her about her language and the intentionality she was using, or how she, because of her lack of awareness, she wasn't intentionally coming into the conversation in a way where it was safe for everyone involved. And so as we're having this conversation, I think it's so important to acknowledge that we have to keep people accountable. And we can come up with amazing strategies to address kind of what's happening. But accountability is so important because we had a conversation about having a safe space. So it's not solely just for us to be able to be in this space and feel comfortable, but also whoever comes next. So just making sure that it's a safe space overall.
Yeah, so I'll speak to that too as well. I think you can also take some of the onus off of yourself. So I've reported, people to ombudsmen, and had them help me navigate those situations. And I've done that actually 2 times specifically. So don't be afraid to get some help with the navigating of those difficult situations for those that come to follow.
Another thing I'd like to add, like kind of from my own experiences, is sometimes I think, and this is not like a rebuke of anything anyone has said, but I think sometimes we really prioritize like the idea of when they go low, we go high in respectability. And I think sometimes it's okay to not be respectable, and it's okay to say that what you said really upset me. I don't agree with this statement. One thing I've found that's been very helpful for me sometimes in situations of like micro or macroaggressions is to just ask, what do you mean by that? And I think sometimes that really trips people up because then they have to kind of think about like, oh wait, oh I may have said something racist. Like let me try to explain it, and then they have to really sit with, oh, this sounds really bad. Okay, maybe I drop this. And so I think that sometimes, obviously, there's levels of professionalism. You want to not be in like open conflict with people, but I think sometimes it's perfectly acceptable to say, I did not appreciate that. This is not okay. I'm not going to give you that grace in this moment.
I think another tip too, and just because you mentioned it, Dr. DeLong, but finding the ally, so having a faculty member that you can confide in, that you can maybe escalate, and it doesn't always have to involve your name anymore at that point.
Yeah, and following up on that, I feel that it has been really pivotal, at least in the stages that I am right now, because as an undergrad, I know that I still have like a lot to to like experience and go through like in the next stages of the early career. But I am gonna say that moving from a small town in Puerto Rico and then suddenly moving to the big city in New York where I go to college, it was definitely a shock. In all senses of the word, like a lot of positive things, of course, but also came, like this new type of environment, entering a space where there wasn't a lot of representation from the background that I come from. Um, and just like handling that and just like straight off the bat in first year. And you mentioned like searching kind of like that support of like higher ups or faculty that that may share as well your experience, or may like connect with your background and experience, because at least in my case, in my first year, so I'm in the biomedical engineering department, and then we have to take a series of like chemistry courses and everything. And then we have to take a series of placement tests in order for some of the classes that we have to take. And then I took the placement test for chemistry. And like I scored on the higher end, and I ended up like getting into the most advanced track. And then when I first entered the classroom the first day, it was only like 20 people, and then I was like the only Latina person there, and more surprising, so I was the only minority there, period. And like I didn't come, maybe it came from a place of being naive or having grown up in an environment where the majority of people are from my background. So I really had an experience growing up, like like series of microaggressions or anything, because I grew up in an environment where everyone shares the more or less the same background of being Puerto Rican, or that mixed background, right? But then I entered this space, and one of the first like interactions that I had in one of the first labs that we had was that we were all introducing each other, like each of the specific lab teams. And then they, like with the years, I had a thicker accent by then. And then they noticed my accent, and they were like, where are you from? And I said, yeah, I'm from Puerto Rico. And they said, they do chemistry in Puerto Rico. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's not, yeah. So, like it was straight off the bat, first week, first year of undergrad. I was really young. I was like 17, 18 when I started college. So it was like first time dealing with that. So at the beginning, I didn't even know how to react. So I feel like it's really important to just kind of like, it's these conferences and these conversations are really important, especially for young people coming up, because like that, we can take from other people's experiences, and we can learn how to manage with these situations. But like hearing these experiences that also people from higher up in the careers have done. Like, you can take in that advice, and then at that time, other microaggressions followed, and then I learned how to manage them. But I had a support from my one of my lab professors from that time, because one of my lab professors, actually, we had like two, and then one of them, he shared similar background to me, that he was Latino too, and everything, and he also helped me manage that situation, and I think it's really also really helpful to kind of like have that network and people that you can talk with, and after these types of situations. But like there also comes a point that like it's completely like, okay, when we say like, okay, that's not, that comment is not okay, that comment should not pass, and it should also be like a learning experience as well for the person that's doing the comment and everything. So yeah, I'm just really grateful to be here as an undergrad too, and hear like the experiences and the advice that everyone here has to offer, because again, it definitely was like kind of like a shock entering that space, and like, especially going through that experience, and me being like first gen work study, and then Puerto Rican, like there were a lot of things going on, to the point that one time they almost denied my work study, because like they thought that I wasn't a U.S. citizen, because the whole thing with Puerto Rico, right? And
We could
yeah,
definitely talk
but yeah,
after, because
yeah, but
I
yeah,
know
yeah,
your
yeah, but
university,
yes,
but we're
sir.
really glad you're here. I
Yeah.
think there is just one more question.
Yeah, yeah.
Jared?
Hello? Yeah. No, I was just gonna say, in terms of like commenting like on the conversation, like I really appreciate everyone sharing, and like this space being like cultivated for people to be able to share their experiences. Like I think one thing that I try to like keep in mind is like I like Superman a lot. I think it's a good analogy to use. And like he chooses to like walk the earth like in in the comics and stuff like that as Clark Kent. Like he doesn't choose to, he chooses to pull his punches. Like he could just ram through the earth and stuff like that. And I think in terms of dealing with like conflict, I feel like I've been told a lot throughout my life that I'm too nice, or you're dealing with a situation with too much kindness, or you're giving someone too much grace. And I think that the truth of the matter is, like, it's a more difficult thing to choose like conversation over like aggressive act, or I think it's a more difficult thing to choose trying to understand why someone is being the way that they are. And that's like yeah. And it's like, and it's really hard to do the mature thing all the time, and it's really taxing. And sometimes you can question whether you're being a strong person. Oh, I should just stand up to this person. I should have a conflict with this person. I should keep pushing back and forth with this person, right? Should be as aggressive as possible and fight for myself and stuff like that. You absolutely should, but I think I think it's important to remember that words and kindness and affording somebody like that understanding of, yeah, we might not agree, but I'm going to sit here and I'm going to have a difficult conversation with you for as long as you're willing to do it with me and stuff like that. And that can only be done if we all like choose to be more understanding of people from different environments and different backgrounds and stuff like that, and choose to pull the punches, I guess. Yeah.
All right, so to just close up the panel for today, we want to ask, so imagine you are looking down at a map of your life, where you've been, the trails you've blazed, the mountains, the valleys, and occasional detours. What is one piece of advice that you would give to your younger self, or someone who is about to embark on their own journey?
Maybe just the first word that like comes to mind.
Yeah. Yes.
Maybe it's because you said journey, but it's a long journey, it's a long road, and you have to be ready for that, right? I mean, by the time I'm a PI, I'm going to be 37 probably, so, like I've been doing this for a very long time, so you should just be prepared for that. I don't think I knew that back then.
Yeah. Go ahead, Nakea.
Life is not always going to go the way that you expect it to go. Roll with the punches, and definitely take every opportunity that's given to you, because you never know when, that opportunity may not come back again. So if you go in with that mindset, you will never fail, and you'll land where you need to be.
Yeah. I was asked that question, and it in my head when I hear that question, I kind of reminds me of the question like, what kind of legacy do you want to leave on like the people you've met and all of that? And I feel like whenever I hear that question, I'm always like, I don't really care what I do scientifically or anything like that. I just want to make sure that I will always be remembered as someone who was kind, right? That's really what it boils down to me. It's like, I don't care if I win a Nobel Prize. Like, I just want to be the person that was kind. And all that, so.
Yeah, the energy that you put out. I do believe in karma, so energy that you put out is the energy that you get back. At some point, it doesn't always happen instantaneously. As far as would I do things differently, is that part of the question too? Or? No. Okay.
You wouldn't do anything differently. You still don't listen, right?
Look, guys, like I said, looking back and looking forward, I'm glad to see where I am, and it was on my own terms to most extent. I had no choice moving from Guyana to Brazil here, but as far as like so again, because the therapist was dropping some knowledge too. There's decisions, there are things that you can that you have control over, and the things that you don't. And there's no point in dwelling on the things that you don't have control over. So to me, once I realized that, it's easier to let go of I guess aggressions or stuff like that. So.
Yeah, so I think we also need you to like tweet more of your advisors' sayings so that we can follow your account and get more of those wisdoms. But we just want to thank you all again so much. Can we give a round of applause to our panelists for their advice?
Thank you guys for the questions. I mean, this is the best part of honestly like symposiums that I attend. It's the real talk, quote unquote, like sharing talking about not so much always the science, but the really interpersonal stuff that we deal with. Because again, in grad school, I don't know how much it's emphasized now, but when I was in grad school, there was no emphasis on interpersonal, skills and communication and relationship building. But clearly, from the theme of this whole conference, there's like a strong component of understanding how to navigate relationships as you move forward with your interdependent careers. Yeah, I mean, find your tribe. That's the most important thing. You can't make it on your own.
Great. I want to thank all of the panelists and Kimberly and Samara for moderating a great panel. I have a few people to thank before we go out and enjoy the reception. I want to, I have slides for this, no? I do have slides for this. Okay, but before I get to that, I want to announce the dates for next year's meeting so that you can write this in your calendars now. Coco, are you paying attention? That's next week. Okay? Okay. Okay, and I'm also really delighted to announce our keynote speakers for next year are going to be Dr. Joanne Trejo from the University of California at San Diego and Dr. Derek Applewhite from Reed College. We're thrilled to have them coming. I'm already looking forward to next year's conference. And it would be great to see lots of you back again. So here's the thank yous. I want to start by thanking the sponsors, Brown's OIED, as we affectionately call them, OGPS, the MCB graduate program, the Brown Center on the Biology of Aging, the Graduate School, Brown Center for Translational Neuroscience, Carney Institute for Brain Science, and the MCB department. I did that first because I really want to acknowledge everybody on the organizing committee who have done an amazing amount of work in the past few weeks. So Miles, Amy, Samara, Phyllis, Carolina, Mark, Eugene, Sophia, Laura, Kimberly, Miles, Mel, Jessica, Amanda, Christoph Schroll. I need to say, Amanda had a baby last week. That's why she's not here, and she's the mystery factor. It's because she's home with a new baby. Christoph and Dominique. I really want to thank the student organizations that have been such, a force in each year's meeting. SACNAS, the Nabrit, BGSA, and GSOC and STEM. Their help in publicizing the conference has been really important. And so something that I learned not from my own advisor, but from my spouse's advisor, is that it's really important to celebrate when good things happen. So I want to celebrate two good things that happened at this conference. So Annabelle and Christina Flores, for the first time, two sisters, talked together at the same conference, which I think is woo! And JP learned that he has been named a new Gilliam Fellow by the HTTP. Janet's not here, right? Because there were two members of the audience, or the two participants who learned today that they were named as Gilliam Fellows. So congratulations. And now we can go out and celebrate out in the atrium.
One more thank you.
Yep.
On behalf of the committee and all of the participants and speakers, we want to thank you, Allison.